maybe we can start with introductions as well if you want.
Mhm.
Um, Going really well. What about you, Vincent? How have you been? How was the moving to Montreal,
Uh,
across the country for your degree?
yep, it happened. It went pretty good, pretty good. Long road, but it was pretty fun. Um, I had really nothing to say about it. It was a lot of traveling, very tiring, but we got here and classes started, so it's a new experience. It's really fast. It's really fast.
How's that been? So you're starting degree in mechanical engineering right now at
Yeah,
UWM.
I'm doing like preparatory year.
Yeah.
So it's different because like in my class we had like 5 people compared to the like 50 that we have in my class right now. So it's a hard adaptation, I'm not gonna lie. Um like the love the physics class. We have a bunch of other class, but math class is it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. It's pretty tough.
Okay, yeah, that's a big adaptation from a big classroom. Um, but that's really exciting, and I'm sure that you'll find your place in really soon. So
So why don't you
I'm not
introduce
worried about you.
yourself?
But
Why don't you introduce yourself, what you do and all that?
yeah, so my name is Gabrielle Martineau. I'm originally from Quebec, the French part of Canada. Most of the Canadians know that, but um, yeah, so from around Montreal. I'm here. I'm right now. I'm living in Hawaii, and I'm a third year graduate student at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology. And this is a campus that is part of the University of Hawaii in Manoa. And so I'm conducting graduate work right now on coral reefs, using molecular approaches to study their diversity and their resilience to climate change mostly. So that's me in a nutshell. I did my bachelor's degree at Laval University in Quebec City, where I was awarded the Schulich Leader Scholarship, and that was back in 2017. So I did my 4 years at Laval, graduated in biology, did so many things while I was there, so many internships, to study abroad programs. So I really got a good experience there, and then decided to come here for graduate school. And what about you? Is that
Well, I am Vincent Gagne. I am a newly awarded scholarship of 2023. I just graduated high school, so I'm just starting out university. I had my first class this Monday, August 28th. And I don't have much to say about like all the cool stuff you're doing. I didn't do as much cool stuff as you did, but I'm trying to I'm working towards be trying to be an astronaut. So that's my goal, and that's what I'm going to work towards in the next couple years. Currently, I'm doing a preparatory year, but I'm going to go into mechanical engineering, and after that, I'm going to try to complete courses for astronautical engineering as well. So that's my plan currently.
That's amazing. A lot of good projects ahead of you. And where are you from originally?
I was born in Quebec, in Longueuil, but when I was around 1 year old, we moved to the Northwest Territories where I resided until now, basically. Um, I stayed there for my entire life. I lived in Yellowknife. There's this town about 20,000 people, very calm, very small. Um, and then just about 3 weeks ago, I moved from Yellowknife to Montreal, traveled 6,000 kilometers in 6 days. Um, a big, long road. And I'm now in the city of Montreal, and the experience, let me tell you, is very different from my tiny little small town.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you're making a big move, entering UDM as a Schulich Leader, and I'm sure you'll just have like so many opportunities over there. Like I'm excited for you. It's an exciting time.
It is pretty
So
exciting time.
awesome. And congratulations on being recently awarded the scholarship. It definitely changed my life and my career. So yeah, it's gonna be all good things from there.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
All right, so why don't we talk about your research on your coral reefs and your sponges that you talked about?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So I have right now I have like two main research projects. One of them is I'm designing tools to try to identify sponges that live on coral reef. Maybe you don't even know what a sponge are. Most people just think that they're useful to clean the dishes, but actually, sponges are organisms that live on coral reefs, and they're a phylum of the tree of life, which is like a branch of the tree of life. Um, and they are really important to coral reefs health. So in the Caribbean and other places like that, you can see like massive forms of sponges. Here in the Indo-Pacific or in Hawaii, sometimes they are more hidden in the crevices of the reef, so they're more hard to see, but they're still there. And the reason why they're so important is that we discovered recently that they have an important role in the carbon system of the of coral reefs. So basically, they take some form of carbon in the water column that's like inaccessible for organisms to feed on, and they basically shed their cells and make it available back for the organisms at the bottom of the food chain. So they kind of like play that super important role that we call the sponge loop. That has been discovered. So that's been like a little revolution. And but most of all, they're really understudied. A lot of people focus on corals and fish, so the other invertebrates are not as glamorous. So for that project, I was focusing on sponges and what we're doing. So I'm working a lot with DNA and molecular biology. So we're designing those tools that are basically small pieces of DNA that will bind to a gene. And we select that specific gene because we know that that specific portion of the gene is unique to different species. And we, in that way, by targeting that specific portion, we are able to identify them. An analogy that sometimes I give to people is that sometimes, for instance, you have a criminal and their fingerprint, and you're trying to match that to the fingerprint database. That's a bit like the same thing with the gene. So here, the DNA sequence would be the fingerprint, and the criminal would be the sponge. So you would take the DNA sequence to try to identify them. And well, that's all nice and well, but like sometimes it's hard to like maybe it's not like obvious to know why that it is important to the big picture, you know. So the reason why we want to identify the sponges with their DNA is because we can just take a piece of their tissue and be able to identify them really quickly, and we can just also take a huge community of reef organisms and just extract the DNA and be able to identify them in mass communities really quickly. And the reason why we want to know which organisms are on a reef, for instance, would be like, well, if we want to be able to detect the changes that are caused by, for instance, increase in sea surface temperature or human presence, like how do the communities change over time? Then we first have to assess who is in the community at first. So we want to know which species are there, and to do that, we need to either now use molecular tools or go underwater and do water surveys in scuba diving mostly. But that is really time consuming and it's cost a lot of money too. And most of the time, the organisms that are kind of hidden in the crevices of the reefs are hard to detect. So it's kind of biased in that way too. And so that's like kind of a new approach to identify the organisms on coral reefs. So that's one of the projects that I've been working on. Um, any questions on that? I try
So,
to,
so, so
yeah.
basically what you're basically doing like you're trying to develop a way to like make a more efficient way to census the sponges, basically. So you
Exactly.
can, so then
That's exactly it.
so then if it gets colder and then you see that the sponges, or in our case, it would probably be warmer because of global warming and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then this sponges start to decline, then you would see like, okay, well, that's probably one cause, or is it something else? Is it fishes or something like that?
Yeah. So if you have a baseline of how communities look, and you can assess you can assess the composition of the species that are there, like which species are there and how abundant they are, then you can see if that changes. And let's say you're comparing a site that you census before an event of increase in sea surface temperature and after, then you can see which species became more abundant. Did you lose some diversity or not? So yeah, that's essentially the big aim is to measure the diversity.
And like, how close are you? Are you like close to completing the project, or is it like still very early in development, or like how's the
Yeah.
roadmap looking?
So that one I'm writing it up right now, so hopefully done really soon. It was essentially just supposed to be part of a big project that's like looking at the communities of sponges all over the Indo-Pacific, but I decided to stop there and to do something different. So right now I'm starting this other project that's still like working on coral reefs, but this time I'm working on corals themselves. So if you want, I can talk about that one, but first I would need to explain what a coral is because it's not mostly coming from Canada. Like it's not like an obvious thing we know. And so corals are actually animals. They're an association between an animal and an algae, and also between their microbiomes. So that's like a symbiosis between the algae and the animal and the algae, but there's also microbes in there. But basically, the animal is a cnidarian, so that's the name of the phylum in the tree of life. So it looks like it's a small polyp. So if you would look at a piece of coral, it's made up of a lot of tiny polyps that are animals, and within its tissues, the polyp hosts microalgae that are called Symbiodiniaceae. But that's not important. That's just a family of them. Um, so they're microscopic and they live in symbiosis. So the coral will offer protection and will give its waste to the algae, like carbon dioxide, water, and phosphate, for instance. And the algae will use that and will photosynthesize and will provide, as we know with trees, photosynthesis will provide sugar and other nutrients like byproducts that will feed the animal. So they live in symbiosis together, and that's what we call the corals. And corals can take many shapes. There's branching corals, more massive forms. There's even one that looks like brain corals, and they're the building block, like the main animals on coral reefs. So what we call I'm blanking right now on the name. Anyway, but yeah, they're basically like the building blocks. That's what I mean of coral reefs. So they're really important to provide habitat to for other species and have many functions. But we study them a lot, and a reason why we study them is because we have noticed that in the last few years there's been a huge decline in coral coverage all over the reefs in the world, pretty much, and has many causes. But some of the main causes are the basically climate change that's increasing the atmospheric carbon dioxide, as we know, and that warms up. That causes well, climate change also causes increases in sea surface temperature due to this increase in temperature, and we see a warming of the water. And what happens is that corals become stressed, and in some instances, they will break the symbiosis between the algae and the coral. And so you can see that the polyp, the animal, will expel its algae when there's a heat stress. And that's really bad because in some instances, that means that the coral starves. Basically, it has no more of its way to. Well, it can also feed in some other ways, but the algae is its main its main food basically. And so we call that coral bleaching. And the reason why we call that bleaching is because the corals become white because it's the algae that give the color to the corals. And underneath that, the coral itself is just calcium carbonate. So it will become all white. And so that's what we call coral bleaching. So if you see a reef that's all white, it's probably not good. So the corals can recover from bleaching, but also they can just die and become basically like piles of rock. And so another one of the threats that we see is ocean acidification. So basically, this increase of atmospheric CO2, mostly caused by increasing green gas emission, will basically be pumped into the ocean because the ocean kind of acts like a physical pump to taking in the excess of that CO2. And that kind of changes the whole chemistry of the system. So that changes the balance of the carbonate system. I'm not going to go too in depth with that, but basically it affects the organisms that have calcium carbonate skeleton, mostly the reef organisms such as corals, oysters, bivalves, because that's what they make their shells out of. So it's harder for we're still studying the effects of that, but in some cases it's harder for them to survive in those environments. And so, well, that's the context. Basically, this other project. So a lot of projects will look at the effect of climate change because that's like what we're in right now, and we're trying to document this change and understand this change. But for that project, we're trying to understand the molecular response of corals to thermal stress, and try to identify which and the pathways that shape, in some cases, the resilience of some corals to the stress. Because we are observing that either some individuals or some species are better at dealing with the stress than others, and we're trying to decipher like why that is. So that's like a big topic right now for marine biologists.
So like basically like climate change is like your thing, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's a main topic, OJ. Yeah.
it affects your field of study so much, right? Because of all
Yeah.
the warming up of ocean that kills your corals. And it I'm curious, like I know that does like do the sponges feel that as well? Do you see like a drop in sponges due to like acidification of the water or the increasing heat of the planet or something like that?
And that's a really good question. We do see some bleaching in sponges, although it's way less occurrent than
Apparent?
apparent than for corals. But interestingly, we see that sponges are actually able to thrive better in more acidic water and like warmer waters. So there's also these theories that are like, oh, are reefs gonna how are reefs gonna change with temperature? Are they gonna change to more like sponge dominated, for instance, and instead of coral dominated? So there's also these kinds of questions of community shift for the whole reef ecosystem. And the reason is like we don't really know. Like there's some theories, but is that really going to happen? So we try to. Some researchers will, for instance, look at some places in the world that are warmer already and try to predict how, like make theory
Make
hypotheses about how is it going to look like that everywhere else? Let's say in 10 years, like in Hawaii here, we look at the Caribbean reef sometimes because they're often like we say like they're like 10 years ahead of us, and then we're like, oh, but that's not like that's still hypothesis because like places differ from one another for so many reasons. But
I
yeah,
mean, you don't see the same species everywhere, right? Probably
exactly,
the coral reefs that are in the Caribbeans are not the same that you're going to be studying over there, right?
exactly. So we can make hypotheses, but we also for that project I'm doing actually that's a someone did the experiment. So we did experiments in tanks to simulate higher temperature and higher and more acidic conditions. So we use mesocosm experiments to do that, which is good, but it's also like a control lab experiment. So maybe the organisms may act different in natural communities. So there's also this part to consider, but a lot of those mesocosm experiments going on all over the world.
So when you mean tanks, you mean like fish tanks and not like tanks, right?
Yeah, I mean fish tanks. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, not dealing with the real
At
tanks.
first I was like, why are they putting them in tanks? And I was like, ah, yes, tanks. That makes more sense.
I mean, yeah, so people will use these as tools to, yeah, to have control experimental settings.
Hmm. That's very interesting.
Thank you. I'm glad. Um, it's kind of hard to like, not hard to explain, but I have to give a lot of context
Well, I
to.
mean, it's but how you finished your master's, right? It took you how long? 6, 7 years to learn all the what you
Yeah,
needed for this. So, I mean, if you're able to give us a fraction of what you learned in 7 years, I think you're doing pretty good.
thank you,
I think
thank
you're
you. I
doing pretty
appreciate
good.
it. That's also a thing with us scientists. Like we need to be better at just explaining what we do, communicating our science. I think
Well, I
that's
mean,
a thing.
we have such a deep understanding of the world, and everything is so complicated these days. Like,
Yeah,
um, the knowledge capacity has risen tremendously um, over years, and it's like it's important that people are able to communicate that information well, right? Because if not, then where are we going?
yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting too to see that the connections between different fields sometimes. Like I have no idea what astrophysicists are doing really. Like I'm also a scientist, but like if they're able to explain it to me in simpler terms, then I might be able to be like, oh yeah, like like I can understand a little what you're doing.
And like the thing is every field is so different, but at the same time they're kind of every like all the planet is all like interconnected with each other, right? So if you know
Yeah,
one field, like for sure you won't be as specialized as like a physicist, but I'm sure like you can understand some of the stuff that's happening in there because you know science is very vast, and like if you dabble in it a little bit, then you can probably dabble in a little bit of all of it.
yeah, no, totally. That's also, yeah, another thing that I think is really important. That's also an advice I have for you as a beginner, as a not a beginner, but a new scientist, is to try to just try different fields, like whatever draws your curiosity, like try it because then not only you're able to understand what you like, but you're also able to like connect the dots and like transfer knowledge between different fields, and sometimes that can just make you more creative to come up with better research questions and kind of like have a better understanding of like the overarching theories of everything. To me, I think that's really important. So I'm glad I did like I worked in biology right now, but I worked in different fields of it. So I have done basic ecology, microbiome work.
Did
Right now,
space stuff as well.
yeah, I did rare disease, based health research, and now I'm doing more like, although I'm still working on coral reefs, doing more like molecular genetics and bioinformatics stuff. So it's like, and I think I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't try all of these and be like, oh, like I really like that, or this is how it connects to each other. So I think that's a big one for me. Like even though it kind of it's tempting to like, okay, I want to do that, only that. Like let's go. Like I want to be more specialized in that right now. I think you'd be wise to try a lot of things and maybe actually you'll change your path a little. And that's like
So
that.
basically take a walk around the park. That's what you're
Take a walk
saying.
around the park. Exactly. Smell the flowers, all the things.
Go
Yeah.
see the bees, go see the flowers, go see the trees, dive in the
Yeah.
lake,
Very important to dive in
dive
the
in
lake.
the Antarctic Ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that. The Arctic one though.
Yeah. No, these are like honestly very interesting, and like they give us a lot of context on like um these days, like with misinformation, stuff like that, with everybody being in such extremes and stuff like that. Like, I think your type of research is very important because it like gives us concrete examples of how like human activity is affecting the rest of the world and stuff like that. And I think that like, for people who are unsure or reticent to believe certain things, like stuff like what you're doing is what is really turning them on the side to be like, okay, maybe we have to calm down a little bit on what we're doing. We have to think things through a little bit better.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's true.
It is. It is indeed. So, anyways, how was your parkour throughout? How was those 7 years of studying for you? 6 years of studying.
Yeah, now you're making me feel old. 16, 7 years, starting 7 years. I'm like,
How is the old person, the grandma, did on in her studies?
grandma's did really well. So I can tell you about some of the experience I had during those 7 years. So essentially, I also did a preparatory year in Laval because I did my grade 12 abroad, so in another part of Canada. So I studied on a ship for 1 year. Did this. I mean, I can go into this
Please
or
do.
okay.
I mean,
So
studying on a ship, that's not what
it's not common.
it's not very common.
Yeah. Let's say I have a little atypical path. So when I was 16, 17, 16, I left at 17, but I decided to do this program that's called Class Afloat, and that's basically yeah, we do you can do your grade 12 or your grade 11, but that's a Canadian program, but it's students from all over the world, and we all get for 9 months together on a sailing ship, a tall ship, and we study. So we have a normal classes. We have a Nova Scotia curriculum, so that was a bit different for me. It's also where I learned most of my English because let's say English is a second
Let's say
language.
Quebec's English is not top notch.
Be careful what you say, but yeah. No, I'm joking, but I agree that in most places it's like let's say it's just learning a second language like everywhere else. You know, it's okay for the written part, but you don't have the communication, like the conversational skills down,
Skills.
because you don't practice, you're not immersed, and you know that, well, you're perfectly bilingual because you moved uh, to the other side of the country and you were immersed. But yeah, in that program it was all in English, but it was students from all over the world, so Europe, Canada, America, Australia. Um, and then we had classes, but then we also sailed over the Atlantic. So we did like 20 ports in different countries, and we learned how to sail. So we navigate the ship. We also have night watch, day watch, and we do the classes. And when we're on ports and on land, we get to explore the different places. So that's kind of how a little bit how I got. I was always interested into to science in the first place, but I didn't know what to do. I thought I was gonna be a vet for the longest time, and then I did an internship at a vet school, and at a vet clinic, and I hated it. Like I was like I could not like stand like the operations and everything, like most passed out and like I was like, oh, this is kind of boring to me, like a 9 to 5, like always doing the same thing. I was like, I cannot do that. And then I did another internship in high school in a genetics lab at McGill. And actually I didn't even know that biological research was a thing. It's not like a common like field that people take unless your parents are scientists. And I was like, oh, like that's really interesting. Like, I don't really understand much about genetics yet. Like I was 16, but I was like, that's an interesting path. And then going on the ship, I had a marine biology class. And I was like, maybe I can combine. I kind of like then I was like, I was aware that it was possible to be a marine biologist. So I was like, oh, maybe I can do biology, and then I can also do marine biology research if I want, which kind of combined my two ideas because I really liked especially like coral reefs ecosystem. I thought like, wow, the diversity is amazing. How do they like? I wanted to study the marine life. And so I went to Laval University, started they have no marine biology, but I did biology, which, like I said earlier, I think was like a blessing because like it allowed me to have a more diverse set of skill, and then to choose from there versus as opposed to starting too specialized, I think so. And so I did my 4 years there, and I did many internships. So my first summer after my preparatory year, I did an internship in northern Quebec. So I was diving there to collect invertebrates and help a postdoc researcher in his research. Got a bit of lab work, granulometry work, like all these a little bit of everything. And the summer after, I went to the Arctic to with the same PI, the same researcher, but a different research team to study algae over there, giant kelp forest, like the huge underwater forest. So dove in the Arctic there, and then that same summer I did two internships because I was really motivated. I did one in French Polynesia um, on coral reefs. So that was like my first experience on reef ecosystem because we don't have coral reefs in Quebec, in the Arctic either. They're tropical or
Are you sure
subtropical.
I think you just didn't look hard enough.
What?
I think
Yeah,
you
maybe
just
I
didn't
didn't.
look.
Maybe I didn't look hard enough. Well, that being said, we do. I think like Arctic and Antarctic, like really cold water ecosystems, are really cool to study too. It's just like I just fell in love with the coral reefs and like just really like them. And so in Fish Polynesia, I was actually doing an internship on fish there, like spear fishing on the reef, to collect some fishes, and then we were doing laboratory work, so taking their gut content to assess like to make food web studies and understand which fish are eating what and diet content work, as well as fish behavior stuff. So I really liked that experience there, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep going on coral reefs. Yeah,
And also you get free fish at the end.
you get free
Free
fish.
fish.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Although I was in a field with a lot of vegetarians, so I think I was the only one who wanted to eat them.
Hey, look, free fish for yourself. What can be better?
What can be freshly caught fish? Yeah, no, that was yeah,
I
that's
mean, did you
those who
eat? I gotta ask, did you eat like weird fish while you were there?
not really. I eat the common ones.
Uh,
It's like I don't want to get sick, like eat the
you
toxins or
didn't eat
something.
like a
I
weird colored one with spikes and weird eyes coming out of its
I
head?
mean, I ate a unicorn fish. I think that's pretty common to eat in the countries here, but in Canada you would never see that. So I ate one that's called Naso unicornis. That's a scientific name
Is it
because we
like
call them
a fish with like a horse head with a horn on it or something like
yeah,
that?
with a horn like that, and it was delicious. So that one was really good. Um, but people in French Polynesia, I was in French Polynesia. I don't know if I did French of it, but uh, yeah, they would eat it. But let's say you don't find this at you're at IGA, in Quebec. You don't find this at IGA or even
You just gotta look in the right section. You just gotta look in the right section.
yeah, maybe so. Yeah, maybe in the under the shrimps or something. That's where they
Gotta look
are.
in the back. It's where they keep their
Yeah,
best fish.
in the back. Um, yeah, so no, that was great in French Polynesia. And then so I was like, oh, I was set on working on coral reefs ecosystem. Um, I did a semester, 2 semester abroad. I did one in Czech Republic where I wanted to learn more about molecular work because I never really done any of it. And I was like, that could be like more and more ecologists are using molecular or using DNA as a tool to like I described earlier, for instance, to identify species. I was like, that's really good to have in my toolkit. So I went to Czech Republic to do a semester in biomedical engineering faculty, which kind of like, again, it's really different, but at the same time, it's not. Like I learned, like I had a really good molecular biology class. I had like electrophysiology class, like all those classes I would have never taken, but that were great as well. I had a great experience there, and then I did another semester abroad in Reunion Island, which is an island off the coast of Madagascar that had a really good like program for coral reefs. And so I actually did a master's curriculum there because it's kind of almost equivalent to our bachelor's. And that was really, really marine biology focused. So we also went in the field, did surveys. We had like oceanography classes. So that was fabulous. I really liked it, and then came back to Quebec and I did my bachelor's thesis on coral microbiomes. So the bacteria that live inside the coral and how and the relationship between thermal stress, like coral bleaching and my coral microbiome. So that's what I worked on. But I also, during that year, I also worked in a completely different field at the Canadian Space Agency to do an internship over there. So again, I was like, I like coral reefs, but I saw this position and I was like, I'm kind of intrigued by it. And so I
I
worked at
mean,
a
it's
Canadian,
space.
yeah.
How are you not intrigued
How are
by
you not
space?
intrigued? You're a future astronaut. So yeah, exactly. I also think like the space field is just like so intriguing, and they were looking for someone to do basically I was conducting a literature review on two different fields. So one of them is rare diseases, which is linked to biology, and the other one is space health, which is like um, the health of the astronauts in space, basically. And that's just like a field that it's really like it's just starting to get to being studied. So it's really it's really fun. It's also challenging to research that because there's so little studies on it.
Well, I mean,
So
there's so little astronauts in the first place, so like
exactly.
studying how astronauts are is just it's it must be hard because the sample size is so small, you know?
That's one of the big problems that we exactly such a little sample size, and that's kind of like I was drawing parallels between the two fields, and that's also a problem in rare diseases, because there's like exactly it says it's rare, so the sample size is really small. So
I mean, did you get to meet any astronauts?
no, because it was during COVID, usually it would have been in person. Um, so I got to meet some crew, not some astronaut crew, but some employees there at the Canadian Space Agency that were really interesting, kind of told me their stories and everything. Didn't get to meet the astronaut, but David Saint-Jacques was on our paper that we published, um, because he contributed to the manuscript. But yeah, that being said, it was a COVID internship, which was obviously different, but at the same time, I don't know if I could have, like I was still finishing out my bachelor's at the time, so that worked for me in a way that I needed to go to the lab to do my other project while being able to do that internship. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to go there in person. So it worked out for me. But yeah, they have really good internships program if you're interested, and like in different fields like robotics, IT, data science, space health. That was the one that was the most connected to what I'm doing. Um, yeah, that was amazing. And then that's all that's my bachelor's right there. And then I decided to apply to graduate school to study coral reefs, and Hawaii has a really good program for that and a really good research, like amazing research facilities to do so while still being in the United States, which is for me as a Canadian pretty kind of
Advantageous?
yeah, it's a bit easier to go there, but there's also some other good programs in Europe where you study, for instance, you study the corals, or all over the world where you can study the corals, but then you wouldn't need to go in the field and then go back. Like for instance, like Amsterdam, a lot of people in the University of Amsterdam actually studying coral reefs, or I know some sponge people, but they what they do is that they're always in Amsterdam, and then they come in the summer, they come in Hawaii to collect, or to other places to collect their data, and they go back. So being here in Hawaii is kind of great because if
I mean, you're just right next to it.
you're right
It's
next
like,
to it.
what's the best place to what better place to research something that when it's next door? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Australia has really good schools too, but I like the American system for graduate school. It's a bit different everywhere, but for a master's program, I was I wanted to stay in the States or in Canada, but I wanted to switch it up, you know. So,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, it's the beach, it's sand, it's the
Exactly.
hot water, it's the sun.
You know,
You know,
exactly.
a lot of people would envy you right now.
I know a lot of people do. I'm super lucky. I like pinch myself every day. I'm like, hey, you're living
Is this a
here.
dream? Is this a dream?
Is this a dream?
You
Yeah,
have like
exactly.
a whole bunch of scars on your shoulder.
From painting every day. Um, yeah, no, exactly. I'm super fortunate to be here, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely a competitive program, so I was super happy to get in, and I think that those experience during the undergrad prepared me for that. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here right now. I have a really good, I think it's really important if you go to graduate school to have a really good advisor too, because even if they're really good on paper, and they're really like they publish a lot, you know, they have a lot of publication. This is kind of like the academic currency is scientific papers. So they have a lot of papers. Normally it's because they're good scientists. But if they're a good person, that's a different story. So you want to make sure that your advisor
Not
is a
only
good
good,
person.
but he's a good person as well.
Yeah, and has your also your own benefits at heart. Yeah. So not only his success, but also wants the best for you. You know, that's also like you know how academia can be, like it's like really competitive. So you want to make sure that they also want the best for your mental health as well, because yeah, maybe sometimes like that's not the priority, but it has to be. To me, it has to be. So
Well, I mean, it is very important. Like the thing is like, you know, as we're undergoing very difficult studies and stuff like that, if we're not motivated and stuff like that, it's it's not gonna go well if you're not motivated to keep going and stuff like that. Because you know, like the thing with science is like if you want to go far, you have to like believe in what you're studying, right? Because you're taking a lot of time. Like you can't just learn stuff like this on the like learn the stuff that you are learning like just like that. You have to put hours and hours and hours to actually simulate like what you're learning and stuff like that. And that can be like if you don't have the proper motivation to do so, it can be well, I would say it's even impossible to do it.
yeah, no, exactly. You have to be in a good state of mind, and school is hard. Undergrad is hard, and graduate school is hard as well because you need to always be learning. And if you're not in a good place to do that, if you have other priorities like trying to make rent, you know, or like just like you're just not happy in general, it's gonna be really hard to I think it's gonna be really hard to focus and to try to kind of get in a focus mode and to
In
try
the right
to
mind.
yeah, in the right mind. So I think mental health is actually huge for has to be a priority if you go to graduate school. Um, Also the people you're surrounded with, you know, like your lab mates, like that's also super important. If you like your project, but you feel like you don't feel good where you are, or you don't like um you don't get along, like you don't have friends, you don't have a community, you know, I think that's also important. So a lot of different things to consider before moving somewhere. Definitely, I should have done more research. I just got really lucky. So that's like pure luck. But if I move somewhere else for my PhD, I will definitely investigate those aspects before.
I mean, do you consider that you have had good lab mates and good like mentors and stuff like that?
Yeah, again, I was really lucky. Not in every one of my internship, I would say. Like sometimes like uh
We need names right now.
yeah, a list. I'll send you a list right now. No, but that being said, like um I had really, really good mentors. I think that's also a thing that you should seek as a scientist because you have your classes. I don't know how it is in engineering, but in science, like we have classes, but we don't do really research. So you have to go and like seek out those opportunities to get research experience because otherwise you can finish your degree without some, and that's perfectly fine if you want, if that's not your goal. But like that being said, like you need to get out of your way and like reach out to people. And I think a good way to find a research mentor is to look at someone. Sometimes it's your professor or like what they do and like are you interested in what they do and how do they treat their students and etc. And like reaching out to them and like yeah, I'm definitely like the product of mentorship. I think I had really, really good mentors and without them like I wouldn't be like where I am today, definitely. So I think just like reaching out to those people who like you kind of admire and be like, okay, like I want to be like them when I grow up, you know. And then ask like make sure that like they have like your best interest at heart, like as I said, and like they want to make you progress and not like use you for your time and like your cheap labor because like that can happen. um but yeah, I think having good mentors that that want to like that can see like that want the best for you and that can try to guide you into the, you know,
The
because
right path.
the right path. Because mostly if you're in academia, if you pursue, it's like really confusing, you know, like nobody tells you what to do. It's just like figure it out. So like how do you apply for this? How do you get this job? How do you review a paper? You know, all of these things, like you need guidance for that. So having good mentors is definitely key. And you also want someone that gives you feedback, that doesn't only like say like, oh no, that's good, you know, like you want someone that also criticize your work, but like in a constructive way. So that's to make you better because otherwise you won't know what you're doing wrong and there's always something you can improve. And so yeah, I think having good mentors is definitely a big one
A
and
key.
a key. And also knowing your boundaries. If you find a mentor that's like pushing you, but you know, like in a bad way, and that's like kind of not a, maybe sometimes it's just not a good fit, like a personality fit, you know to step out and to like remember that you matter, like you know, like
I
um
am important.
you are important and to step out of that situation, sometimes toxic situation, and just find know that there's better out there.
Has this
That's
ever
also
happened to you?
um well, I had like a situation where I definitely felt like not too comfortable in a research setting or just like yeah. So definitely it happened to me. Um, but you know, looking back, um, I definitely had really, really good mentors too. But now now I'm definitely aware that um choosing an advisor for a future project, I'm really careful with that. And no matter how successful they are, if they're treating their students like crap, like it's not worth it, you know.
Mhm.
So, well, yeah, that's my 2 cents on mentorship right here.
Your
And what's
two
also
cents.
my 2 cents, and what's also nice is that once you get to a graduate level, you can also mentor students. You can start mentoring students. So I have been doing that last year for a summer program. I don't know if I'll do it this year, but that's also really nice because it's like giving back to the.
Hey, look, I'll call you. All right.
You'll come be my intern. It's awesome.
I'll come
Um,
fly to Hawaii to be your intern. How about that?
good
And we'll
deal.
dive underwater. How about that?
Good deal. I agree. But yeah, no, that's also another fun experience where you're totally in different shoes, like, okay, how do I mentor someone? I've never done that before.
Would you consider yourself a good mentor? That's the question.
I don't know, you should ask my students.
Self-evaluation time right now.
Self-evaluation. I don't know, definitely have things to improve, but I'm trying to develop my own mentorship style right now. About how this is also from my experience, like what did I like from my mentor, and what did I think would be necessary to change? What do I not want to see? That's mostly what I go by, what I try to avoid. Like, what should I not do? And then the rest should be fine. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep. Like, I mean, it's like you're trying, I'm gonna do a math comparison, right? It's kind of like if you're trying to find the
So,
domain of a function, you're
yeah,
not gonna look for everything you can find, you're gonna look for everything you cannot find.
exactly. Are you taking calculus right now?
Yes,
Are
I'm
you
taking
seeing domains?
calculus, yes.
Calcul différentiel.
Yeah,
That's a fun one, I thought.
yep.
I
But
was like,
I'm happy it's fast. It's very fast.
it's fast paced. Um, yeah, I mean prep year was pretty fast paced. I think more than CEGEP even. I'm not
I
sure.
mean, in
So
your prep year, did you like how did you find your prep year?
prep year was challenging because the courses were hard. Um, it's harder in a bit because you're not in your topic, right? You're just studying general sciences, and maybe in some cases like, oh, I'm gonna major in biology, but my prep year is everything, but I have one biology class. But I actually miss taking like chemistry classes and math classes. Like, I loved it. I love it. I even like the physics. Um, but it's to me it was just the I was not in my group right away, in my cohort, let's say. So I think it was a bit lonely in that way, that people will just come to class and leave and just want to be there to finish the class. Where I was I wanted to learn and to make friends. So I think it was a bit long for that. But otherwise I had good professors, and I thought the courses were interesting. Mostly for me, like, I will be honest, like, I don't really use much of the chemistry or physics in what I do, but I will use a lot of the statistics. And I had a stats class in prep year that prepared me well for that, for some statistics. I wish I would
You're
use.
you're telling me you're not using the physics you learned to determine the acceleration of the coral reefs? Come on. Come on.
Yeah, what's the acceleration of the sea
I
floor?
think you need
Good question.
to redo your plan because if you're not thinking about that, then it's wrong. It's wrong. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I should uh I should include that. No, there are some prints. I think we in physical chemistry, there's some little concepts um that we might have used, but like, yeah, nothing.
I mean, I'm not sure about that, but like, so you said that coral reefs are living things, but do they move at all or not really?
Corals, they're sessile, so that means that they don't move.
Okay.
It's a jargon, but um the animals don't move, but yeah, they actually can capture. They have like stinging, uh, yeah, stinging tentacles, kind of, that can capture um like prey in the water column if you want
Mm-hmm.
to feed. That's the other ways that they can feed. And so they cannot really, like, they cannot change from place to another, but I guess they can do some movement a little bit.
So they have like arms, but they can't like move their feet or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a tree. They can move their branches in the
Their
wind.
branches.
Yeah. I mean, not the trees cannot really, but if the trees could move their branches, that you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. I
Now
got
I'm
you.
gonna look outside if the trees are moving their branches.
We're catching you. We're
Yeah,
after you.
maybe.
I mean, you got like coconut trees, right?
If what?
You only got coconut trees over there, right?
No,
Or palm
no.
trees?
Yeah, we actually have other types of trees. Like we actually have some types of pine trees. I'm looking through the window right now, but
Pine trees? That's
yeah,
crazy.
they're invasive. Um, yeah, there's Hawaii's a really good place to study plant biology as well. This is not my thing at all, but
That's
uh,
pretty interesting.
yeah, so like tropical forests and flora here. It's yeah, just biology in general. It's a big place for that. Um, so a lot of endemic species here in Hawaii. Endemic is like they're native from there, you know, so when they're only found there. So so yeah, also interesting if you're into plant biology and stuff like that.
So basically, Hawaii's like the biologist like treasure trove or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. I'd say the Galapagos would be you
The
know,
true treasure trove.
yeah. Uh, but you cannot study there. Like you can go, I'm not even sure. Like you can barely go as a tourist. Um, but to study, I think Hawaii, yeah, it's definitely up there for a biologist.
I mean, you got the water, you got the trees, you got the animals, you got the
Yeah,
birds.
yeah. Rainier Island was also pretty good. There's also a university in Guam. That's another small island, um, American territory. They also have some colleagues working there on corals. I don't know if they have as much. I don't know what the forests look like there, but they have really good. They have really nice coral reefs. Otherwise, other good schools, but you're not. As I said, you're not there. Like to you're not at your field location to collect
Yeah.
data. You know.
Hmm. Fairly interesting.
Thank you.
No, but for real, like those like I chose engineering, but like
Mhm.
for the longest time I wanted to go in biology. I want to go in biology. So like all of these like stuff, I want to go into molecular biology or microorganism type stuff. I think that's
Yeah.
molecular biology, right?
There's microbiology and
Okay,
molecular
micro.
biology,
Yeah.
but in some way, sometimes they're just linked because you study the DNA of the microbes. You know, that's what I did a little bit for my undergrad, but thesis. But yeah, there's just so many spheres of biology that's interesting. So you would have picked some more lab work and the
Well, I mean, it's
microbiome.
yeah, it's so interesting. Like
It's
that
a whole
there's a whole ecosystem in in my finger, there's like more like creatures than like the city of Montreal. It's crazy to think about, right?
yeah, no, it's insane. Microbiomes are, and we're just starting to understand them. Like what, like like what do they
Hmm.
do? Like why are they everywhere? I know. I'm really interested in microbiomes as well. And
And it's
there's
like, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and I was like research on them for every organism, so you can study it for humans, for corals, for so many different things. And that like yeah, fascinating.
Like, isn't like taking the DNA of stuff is kind of like trying to force like for the sponge thing and the coral
Mhm.
reefs, isn't like splicing the DNA trying to like remix it? Isn't that kind of trying to do evolution on itself? No?
I see what you mean. Right now what I'm doing is I'm not manipulating the DNA sequence or like inserting DNA into it or removing or doing like what do we call it, like gene knockout. So, but you could do that. Like some people can do that, and they're starting to do that mostly in Australia for corals. Like using CRISPR, like which is probably
The
you
best, yeah, the best like uh DNA manipulating tool and stuff like that.
yeah, it's like a molecular scissors that goes
Hmm.
and cuts their DNA and changes it. So you can do that. I don't do that at the moment. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just looking at what is there, like their
Okay,
DNA. It's like I don't change the molecule. And I will just so in my tool, what I'm doing is I'm cutting the DNA that's already there, but I'm not like
changing it or replacing
yeah,
it.
replacing it. And so with it's really interesting because there's like this really in the past year there's been like this revolution of like sequencing technology and what we call like next generation sequencing, which you can take like uh, tons of samples and sequence of different organism or the same organism and like sequence it. Sequence it basically means reading the sequence. So the DNA is made up of four letters, A, C, T, and G. And sequencing it means like taking the molecule and like reading the base pairs, of what is there. So there's been like huge like improvement in those technologies, and they're way cheaper and more accessible. So that's why we can do all this work now. And then once you get the sequence, then you need to do uh, use what we call bioinformatics, which is on the computer and like a way that you basically like clean up those sequences and assign them to different species, and that's like also like another different field of biology that some people will only focus on that. And
Hmm.
so yeah, that with that revolution, if we can say now, um, now a lot of people are turning to molecular methods to understand and answer several different questions across the fields of biology, which makes sense because our DNA is basically like the code of life. So you can understand just so many things just by looking at the sequence. To me, that's like what is fascinating.
Do you have like a like in can you actually see DNA like in a microscope or something like that?
Um, I think you could. I think you could. I've never seen it myself. Like it's just so tiny.
So
Yeah.
how do you know what the DNA is? How do you like look for it?
So we have a lot of like a lot of tools.
Okay,
So
so it's like a machine that does it for you or something like that.
no, so if let's say we wanted to, well, you can do it now. There's like robots that will help you do it, but like it's all like chemistry and like basically if we want to extract a DNA from your cell, we will take the cell and we basically like physically we'll physically like break down the cell because the DNA is inside the nucleus of the cell, and
It's
then
like a
we will
laser.
no, just like mechanically and through like with buffers that like create a lysis of the cell, basically make it first. And then we
Hmm.
get the DNA from inside of it. And we, after that, we use, for instance, like we can do with different chemicals or a type of columns that binds to the sequence. So we use the chemistry of the molecule to like grab it out of everything else if you want. And then we can verify if we have DNA, we can quantify it with some different types of quantification machines, and we can also look on what we call a gel to see it under the light if we have like what fraction of DNA do we like, what is the size of DNA do we have, is it degraded or not. So now it's really easy for us to know like we if we have some and like how much we have, but to be able to read the sequence and to tell to be able to read the sequence, then we need to send it to the sequencing machine that can then read it, and that's a machine that does that, and then it sends us back basically like a file with like thousands of just letters, and then that's what we get back. So it's all the techniques and there's lots of techniques in the lab developed to just obtain the DNA, specific DNA we want. So yeah, that's like just molecular biology work.
Molecular biology 101. The
Exactly.
classic easy stuff, you know.
Yeah. 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 Sorry. No. I mean, I could spend an entire hour talking about that. I think that's fascinating, but um, yeah, there's just a lot of laboratory laboratory techniques, and it's definitely easier to understand once you see it because you understand the protocols. But just by reading a protocol, it's
Mhm.
really hard to kind of get a sense of what you're doing.
I mean, yeah, it's like the thing is like if you don't have like practice experience, then at some point, like you're because like you could spend your entire life in school, but still have less experience, like still be less efficient as a like scientist as someone who did more like field work and stuff like that, right? Just because
Yeah.
the tricks you learn on the site, like you won't learn on in the textbooks, right?
Yeah. So definitely hands-on practical work and these kind of skills are just really crucial. I think if you want to become a scientist, and I think the more you go up in the academic ladder, so you start with bachelor's, then you do master's, PhD, or postdoc, and if you like eventually if that's your goal, you're a professor, then it's more like the experience that matters than like the diplomas, you know. So like what experience did you get during that degree? Like what skills, like it's the skills that you acquired and like how are you able to apply those skills to answer research questions. So it's definitely like the more you go, it's like okay, even if like maybe two master's degree are not equivalent because this person this had this skill and this person just had in the courses, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely. And I think that's why like lab work is really important for biological training because you just need it. And I'd say more than that, like internships are really valuable because that's like you learn on the spot and not necessarily, yeah, like just learning the different phases, facets of research. Yeah.
Mhm.
Are you thinking of doing internships in engineering?
Definitely. Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah.
look into like Canadian Space Agency internships and stuff like that. Um and um other engineering internship. Like during the year, I'm thinking of joining like the space club or whatever. They do rockets and stuff like that. So uh I want to build a rocket. I think it's gonna be pretty
That
cool.
sounds so fun. At
I've
UW, they
wanted
have that.
I want to build one this summer, but like I was like, damn, that's like you need a lot of permits. And I was like, that's kind of tough to get all those permits. So I was like, I'll wait until university. And there's a space rocket thing that they do competitions with and stuff like that. So I'm like, I want to build a rocket.
That's so exciting. So are you like one team and you build a rocket and you're like against the other universities or
I think that's how it works.
like a space race kind of thing?
No, they have like a bunch of really cool stuff at Polytechnique. Like they have a fully solar powered car. They have like electric race car, like a F1 race car. They have they have like a human powered submarine. They have uh a whole bunch of stuff that's like it's crazy. They have a cement kayak, which is like really
Oh,
crazy.
my friends have done some of it. Yeah, at Laval. It's like cement kayak competition where you build
Hmm.
like you also have to paddle, you know.
Yeah, it's just like really
That's amazing.
interesting like stuff that they're building, you know?
So you can get in all those clubs if you want. And I guess the internships in engineering are more like in companies, right? Than in
Probably, I would imagine.
like maybe there's research labs.
Well, I mean, engineering is less about like research, I think.
Yeah,
I'd have to educate myself better on that, but it's more like like building stuff and designing things and stuff like that.
yeah. Um, well, that's exciting.
It's pretty exciting.
You have to let me know about the space club. That's awesome.
I will. Don't worry. I got you.
Where do you launch it?
I
On
think
On
it's
Montreal?
I think it's yep, on top of Montreal.
On top of Montreal,
And
yeah.
then it crashes into a plane.
No problem.
Um, I think it's in Mexico or New Mexico, somewhere
Oh
over here.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I would definitely do that if I were you. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And it's also really cool that you can like, and the thing is like all of these are like student like made and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
like there's no teachers or anything. It's all the students that make the rockets and stuff like that. So I think it's really like a really cool idea that they're gonna that they're trying to do. You know, they have a lot of experience in doing rockets and stuff like that that I don't, but I hope I will acquire some of that experience and be able to put it to use myself when I do end up being in space.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And yeah, it's also fun that it's like a student space because then you can, yeah, it's like you have your own space. You can just like build and create and
No adults allowed in
no
here.
adults. Well, technically we're adults, but are we really?
Okay,
We're
no old people like
academic
you
adults.
allowed.
Exactly, my son. I'm not allowed, not allowed in the club. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, do you have any other questions or
I
anything else
think
you want to know?
I think it was super interesting. I thank you for taking some of your time. Uh, it was very interesting. I know you're probably a very busy person, so I thank you for spending an hour with me and talk to me about your research project, which are super interesting, your life experience and all that, and a little bit of your your road into becoming the master biologist that you are. So I thank you very much for that. Um,
Thank
it was
you
a
so
very
much.
enlightening conversation.
Well, thank you so much also for taking the time at the busy beginning of the semester and for asking me good questions and for the company. And I'm excited to see what the future holds for you in those next 4 years. So hopefully can keep in touch and I'll come say hi when I'm in Montreal and have fun at the
Hell yeah.
yeah, have fun at the Schulich event coming up soon. I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like Canada. I'm kind of bummed to miss out on that, but um yeah, I think that's another good way to just meet other really inspiring young people and just make some connections. So I think you'll have a blast, definitely.